I'm gonna say this right now. Tree of Life's biggest flaw was that it was made for RPG Maker 3. As impressive as this game is, it has a bunch of problems, and the majority of those problems exist simply because the game used up all of the available memory. How do you properly review a game that couldn't be improved upon even if the creator wanted to? And you can tell that Obright was willing to put in the effort. This game is packed with content. The bulk of that content comes from the 8 different quest paths you can take in the game. I'll actually be looking at those quests individually in a bit, but first, let's take a look at the very first feature you are introduced to. At the beginning of the game, you have the choice of being either a boy or a girl, and this choice isn't just for aesthetics either. Your choice will actually help determine your character's personality and how certain people act towards you. And there are various factors that also determine your character's personality. Early on in the game, you wander around town and take a cleverly concealed personality quiz. This personality quiz will affect which of 4 families you get adopted by, and your life with that family will affect your personality. And later on, whichever quest path you complete first also affects who you grow up to become. So while the various quests in the game take up a lot of memory, I can't imagine how much memory your character interactions also take up. Which brings up my first suggestion for the game. Since memory was Obright's biggest obstacle when creating this game, what if there were 2 different versions of this game? One focusing on Zoe, the other focusing on Victor. With only half the character-specific dialogue on each version, that would have allowed for a lot more space to make a more complete game. Sure, that would have made creating the game a bit more difficult, since you can't copy data between game files, but like I said, it seems like Obright was willing to put in as much effort into Tree of Life as he could. Now that we've solved the memory issue, it'll be easier to give this game a proper review. As I said, the game contains a total of 8 quest paths for you to complete. One quest is completely optional. The remaining 7 will award you a ranking upon completion, and upon completing all 7, you'll receive a final ranking at the end. Your ranking is determined largely in part due to the quest item you are using, along with any specialized tasks you can take as a bonus. Those quest items are where most of the game's replay value comes from. You see, unless you have the supreme tool for that quest, you will not be able to get a perfect rank. The key is that certain quests award you with certain tools, and the replay value comes from figuring out which is the best order to take the quests. Now, while getting a good rank in each individual quest will give you better items, I don't think the final ranking gives you anything other than bragging rights. Well, at the very least, the challenge of getting a better rank will give you an excuse to try out another character. Now, let's talk about each of the quests individually. We'll talk about these quests in the same order that I completed them, starting with the Archeology quest, which happens to be my personal favorite. Out of all the quests in the game, this one seemed to give you the most to do. You were sent to 3 separate mini-dungeons, each with its own puzzle to solve. And what I love about the quest is that completing the puzzles was not a requirement for completing the quest, and each puzzle was completely different. The rest of the quests in the game didn't give you as much variety, but they were still interesting to an extent. The Artist quest was definitely hurt by the limitations of RPG Maker 3. 2 of your tasks were to carve a couple of statues. How do you carve the statues? By choosing yes. I would have really liked there to be something special you had to do in order to carve the statues. The other task was to talk to various townsfolk who wanted a portrait of themselves. There wasn't anything special to these either, but at least the pictures were interesting to look at. The next quest I completed was the Musician quest. This one was a little more interesting, and that might be in part due to the guildmaster, Fristy. She's probably my favorite character in the game. Not sure why, maybe it's her character portrait. After acquiring an ancient music scroll from Ursus, which by the way I think it would be really cool to find one of those in real life, our main task is to play music to various townsfolk. And if it's not apparent already, then I'll point this out to you now. A lot of the tasks in this game involve simply talking to people. Want to draw someone's portrait? Choose portrait. Done. Want to play music for someone? Choose play music. Done. Want to flirt with someone? Choose flirt. Done. It really makes me wonder if Obright could have done something fancier with the character interactions, had he the extra memory. Anyway, once you've played music for enough people, your next 2 tasks require that you find more ancient music scrolls and ultimately perform concerts for the fans you've acquired. And I gotta say, it's nice that you can find more than one song to play. One thing I enjoyed about finding those extra scrolls is that you were given a key to finally unlock some treasure chests that had been bugging me the entire game. And performing the concerts was kinda fun since you had an actual audience and played the various songs you found. Sure, playing the songs was as simple as choosing yes, but I honestly can't think of a better way to play music in RPG Maker 3. The 4th quest I completed was the cooking quest. This was actually the first quest I tried tackling, and if you want a perfect final ranking, it might actually be the first quest you'd want to tackle, since it doesn't require any rank-specific tools to complete. That said, it's a terrible quest for a beginner. Your quest master gives you so many tasks from the very start that it can seem a little overwhelming, plus you actually need to start the trading quest in order to acquire the various cookware you need. On that note, this game really should have come with a guide. Aside from gathering cookware though, the quest really wasn't as complicated as it sounded. Your various ingredients could be found easily by chatting with certain people and opening all the wooden treasure chests in town. Meanwhile, acquiring the recipes was deceptively difficult. The 4 recipes were all locked in a few cabinets and you had to figure out the combinations to get into them. I thought that maybe the combinations were written somewhere in town or something like that, but no, the key to unlocking the cabinets was to choose different buttons until you realized that certain numbers made a special sound when you clicked them. The buttons that made a sound are the correct buttons. Well gee, it sure would have been nice had someone in the game tipped me off about that. The only reason I figured it out was because I actually went into the editor to peek at the game's data. The second half of the cooking quest was definitely more enjoyable. Once you've cooked all the meals, you're supposed to find 4 hungry townsfolk and choose feed. But unlike choosing portrait or choosing play music, there's actually a trick for feeding people. Each person has a favorite meal, and to get the best rank, you have to figure out which meal that is. Perhaps the other townsfolk quest could have been handled in a similar way, like maybe there could have been a couple songs you could have played a person. Regardless of your rank though, completing the cooking quest will allow the local restaurant to open, where you will be able to buy some items for when you head out into the field. More on that later. Next up was the romantic quest, and oh boy, here comes some disappointment. Your first task is to flirt with a bunch of people in town. This plays out just like drawing portraits and playing music for people. Just choose flirt. Your other task is to buy the mansion for sale in town. Yes, you can buy your own mansion. How do you do that? Acquire int points. The int points are displayed with the int stat, which stands for intelligence. Intelligence affects how well a character controlled by the computer plays. Since your characters aren't controlled by the computer, Obright decided to use the stat to show int points, which I think was pretty clever. Along with buying a mansion, int points are also used to buy pots for your house, and you can trade off int points for an int medal and sell those on the black market. How do you acquire int points? Either by fighting monsters or by receiving an int medal from certain quests. Once you have the mansion, you'll have yourself a butler and a maid. The maid is actually important for the music quest and the church quest, the latter I'll get to in a bit. The butler will tell you about the day's weather, which serves no purpose other than ambience, as well as sell you pots for your home. And the butler has a third purpose, which I will get to momentarily. And by the way, buying the mansion is a great way to stick it to Marla, who bullied Zoe when they were kids. Now, back to the romantic quest. The interesting thing is that you can buy the mansion at any point during the game. So why is it tied to the romantic quest? So that you will have a place to call home when you marry someone. Yes, you can get married in this game. Along with that, you can have a child. The butler helps you with that part, although he's a bit misleading when he tells you how he'll help. The interesting thing is, you can marry anybody you can flirt with, regardless of whether your character is male or female. Yes, gay relationships are completely allowed. The only catch is that each person has certain requirements for marriage. Fristy, for example, will only marry you if you manage to get rank 1 on the music quest. One thing everyone has in common, though, is that nobody will marry you without the supreme perfume. You acquire the supreme perfume by completing the cooking quest, so make sure you do that before you run off flirting with everyone. Why do you need the supreme perfume from the cooking quest? Because your mate will give you an item from the restaurant that opens upon completing the cooking quest. And unfortunately, that's all marriage is good for. Because Obright ran out of memory, all your mate does is give the same message time and time again and give you a single item. And your child is even worse, a single message and nothing else. This is easily the most disappointing thing in the entire game. Getting married and having a child is one of the features mentioned in the game's description, and it was something I was looking forward to the entire game. But getting married and having a child does nothing. So disappointed. Anyway, we finally move on to the trading quest. This is by far the longest quest in the game. Maximilian has 3 stores in town, and they all closed down due to financial failure. He has 3 stashes of money hidden away in case of emergency, but he can't remember where he hid that money. One of Maximilian's sons, Chester, was going to help him recover that money out of the goodness of his heart, using an invention that he was building. Maximilian, being one of the worst fathers in the world, took the parts to Chester's machine and threw them away. So now we have to help find those parts so we can help find those money stashes. There's actually 3 machines you have to build. The first is the metal detector. Building it is as simple as acquiring the parts in the trading loop and scanning them into a blueprint. Or it would be that simple if it weren't for the trading loop part. Again, this game really needed a guide. The metal detector will help find Max's first stash of money, as well as the parts for the second machine, which Max had apparently buried. Seriously, WTF, mates? The second machine is the sonar console, which allows you to get the stash of money hidden in water, as well as some parts that were tossed in the water. Finding the parts is tricky, but thankfully various townsfolk give you hints on where to find the parts. Once you build the last machine, the remote droid, you can head out to a cave far from town and use it to dig to Max's last stash of money. Finding that stash of money is a little confusing as you're sort of digging blindly. It might have been helpful if the cave you were digging into was a little mini dungeon, with your character being replaced by some robot-looking character. Not that RPG Maker 3 has robot characters, but I'm sure some characters' color scheme can make it look robotish. I do like that you had to dig for a key in order to access the treasure chest though. With all 3 stashes of money found, the trading quest is complete, although you can continue the trading loop for other quests, such as the cooking quest. Max's 3 stores are the weapons shop, the armor shop, and the accessories shop. The stuff in these shops are expensive, so good luck buying the stuff you need. On that note, I have to make another complaint. In Tree of Life, you gain money from fighting monsters. Odds are you're not going to stand the chance all by yourself, so you have to gather some party members. Since this is a game about your character, Obright didn't want you to be able to swap the team leader and, say, flirt with somebody as the dog. So to prevent this, he made it so that when you recruit party members, they don't actually join you until you leave town. I have a real problem with this. First off, without having anybody with you when you're shopping for equipment, you have no idea who can equip what, which is another case where having a guide would have been really useful. Worse than that, one of RPG Maker 3's more annoying features is that inventory is restricted by character rather than collected in a universal bag, and each character can only hold up to 10 items. When you are shopping for equipment, you have no idea if your party members have too much inventory or if they already have a certain item. If Obright had the memory, it would have been really nice to have your party members with you while you're inside a shop. While I'm thinking about it, the method in which you gather your team also makes it too much of a hassle to experiment with different party members. Anyway, we move on to the last of the main quests, the Holy Quest. This one is interesting, partly on account you could potentially have it part way completed even before starting the quest. You see, there are various people in town who are looking for help. Some of the help they want simply comes from the trading loop. In fact, one of the people you help is Chester to complete the trading quest. There's also one particular person who wants you to locate 3 elemental books, and another person asks you for some int points. So there is a bit of variety when it comes to helping people. The second half of the Holy Quest requires that you gather a team and fight a demon in the catacombs. Whether this monster is easy or hard, I can't say. Since I waited until the end of the game to fight it, I had already leveled up a bit and acquired some really powerful equipment. So that's all of the main quests of the game. Now we move on to the optional quest, the Thief quest. Early on in the game, while you're taking the personality test, a friend of yours is hiding behind a building. If you choose the right option, she'll give you a key so that you can find her again later. If you choose the wrong option, or if you fail to find her entirely, you will not be able to access the Thief quest. First off, I actually kinda like that. I think it's nice to hide a little secret like that. So, when you find your friend later on, she gives you a mission to sneak into people's houses and acquire their supreme tools. I have so many problems with this quest. First off, you have to wear a disguise in order to perform the quest. You acquire the disguise from a nearby treasure chest. You are also told not to wander around outside in that disguise, or you'll be arrested on sight. When performing the quest, you're given the choice of 3 houses to steal from. I thought that you had to steal from all 3 houses in a row before you'd have the chance to quit and save. Unbeknownst to me, you have the option to stop in between houses by putting the disguise back in the treasure chest. Okay, I know I wasn't supposed to wander out with the disguise on, but she never said I could put it back anytime I wanted. Seriously, how many games do you know of where you put something back into a treasure chest? My next problem is that the quest is just way too hard. Okay, yeah, you're stealing the supreme tools. This will make it so you don't have to worry so much about completing the quest of the game in the perfect order. So of course it's gonna be difficult. But this is ridiculously hard. When you're wearing a disguise, you are technically a separate character. If you happen to be holding any healing items when you put on the disguise, you leave behind the items. And guess what? Your disguised character doesn't have any healing items. Your character has a dagger that can steal HP from enemies, but that's only helpful if you're lucky. You see, when you are invading someone's home, there are invisible spots where you will trigger a fight with a security guard. It's actually possible to completely avoid those traps, and I do like the challenge of doing so. The problem comes from the security guards you fight. They cause more damage than you can steal back. They have an attack that can take away your MP, but if they use nothing but their damaging attacks, eventually you're gonna die. If you win a battle though, you do have a chance of winning a dagger capable of taking them down in one hit. That's fine until you reach the second set of houses to rob, where you fight 2 security guards at once. You might kill one in one hit, but the other is still going to cause damage to you. And if you haven't found the dagger that steals more HP than your regular dagger, eventually you're gonna die. To make things worse, your health as a thief does not get restored when you rest in your bed. So you better hope you get lucky. Oh, and speaking of luck, if you win a fight against the security guard, there's a chance you'll set off the alarm, at which point you're thrown in jail. If you decide to wait out your sentence, you'll be waiting around for at least a half hour or so. And when you get released, everybody in town will know it was you who got caught, even though you're still wearing your disguise. So you're better off counting it as a game over and resetting. Now, getting in jail is a perfectly acceptable consequence, but considering how hard it is to fight through the security guards, it's really annoying when you're finally able to get through them, only to find yourself having to reset the game anyway. The Thief quest is easily the worst quest in the game, and that's unfortunate, cause I was really looking forward to it. If I may make a suggestion, I have 3. 1. There really should have been another way to heal. Being able to rest in bed would have been nice. 2. Waiting out the sentence in jail would be too much of a pain. Maybe there should have been a way to make the sentence go by faster, or escape from jail. Kinda think of it, there was a breakable path that led into another jail cell. What was the point of that? And yeah, the townsfolk would have hated me, but the game does provide you with a way to get back on everyone's good side. And 3. Make it so that if you do trigger a security guard and you survive, make the trap visible so you don't run into it again by accident. RPG Maker 3's hitboxes for invisible events are really huge. I mean, look at how many times I turned away from a trap only to hit it again anyway. Now, I'm not saying you have to make the traps permanently visible, just until you leave the house. That way, if you make it easier to get out of jail, the player will still have to remember where the traps were. By the way, it should be mentioned that you have the option to steal from a few of the townsfolk in the game. This isn't actually part of the thief quest, it's just something to do, like opening living treasure chests. So, that's all of the quests in Ursus Quest Tree of Life. Now let's move on to the battles. Now, I've already made it quite clear that I really don't like how this game was balanced. I'm gonna make it even clearer. Okay, so the way gaining strength works is, for every monster you kill, you gain an int point. Every 10 int points, you and all your other party members level up. I am okay with that. Although I am wondering why your dog doesn't level up the same way. Instead, your dog stays at level 1 and only gains stats if you find a collar, which, by the way, I never found, so I don't know how that works. Anyway, I have no problem with how you level up, but I do have a problem with how difficult the fights are. The way the difficulty works is, the further you go away from town, the more powerful monsters you fight. That's how it works in any normal RPG, but here's the problem. This isn't a normal RPG, it's an open-ended RPG. Some of the game's quests will require you to head out into the most difficult areas of the game, and since you can take these quests in any order, you could very well be sent into those areas at level 1. Thankfully, there is an item that lets you avoid all random encounters, and eventually you learn a spell that does the same. And really, the only battle that you are required to fight is the demon in the catacombs for the holy quest. This is all well and good, but it still bugs the heck out of me that you balance an open-ended RPG like a traditional RPG. And it bugs me even more now that I know the logic behind the Dark Wyvern's difficulty. The Dark Wyvern is the game's optional boss, and it comes with a whopping 8,000 HP. If you manage to beat it, there is a chance that you'll be rewarded with a nice item. Really? A chance? How would you feel if you beat Kulex in Mario RPG and you didn't get anything from it? I don't care if it's the optional boss of the game and there isn't anything to do after it. You need to have a guaranteed reward. As for the Dark Wyvern's difficulty, according to Obright, I was really underleveled, and the method I used to beat it was just a trick to use to fight it sooner than you're supposed to. In actuality, the Dark Wyvern is a fight to reward people who grind it to around level 30. Okay, first off, who's gonna purposely grind to level 30? This is RPG Maker 3 we're talking about. Not only does it have the second most boring battle system ever, RPG Maker 3 has some of the worst accuracy rates I've ever seen. If there's any grinding done by anybody, it's gonna be naturally, by fighting any monsters that happen to be in the way while performing quests. That's what I did, and by the time I was done with the game, I was only at level 9. That's because of how difficult the battles are. Since the game kept sending me into areas that were too difficult to survive, I made extensive use of the items that let you avoid battles. And I imagine most people who play this game would be the same way. The only people who would be willing to grind all the way to level 30 are the same people who enjoy the Dread Mill in Super Paper Mario. Oh gosh, and I just remembered we're about to return to that game. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the game's battles. Well, if I had to say something good about the battles, it's that I'm glad my character developed into an archer. Hard accuracy or not, it's really fun shooting things with a bow and arrow. So, now that I've scraped away at the meat and bones of this game, it's time to talk about the leftovers. First, it's rather unfortunate that this game had unused data hogging up memory. I mean, on the one hand, it's kinda cool to see leftover content that wasn't used, But on the other hand, this game really could have used the extra memory. One thing that could have benefited from the extra memory is your dog. Like with your thief, the dog does not get healed when you rest in bed. Along with that, the dog doesn't let you know that it's going to wait outside to join your battle team, and that was really confusing at first. And you know, this game actually has several glitches besides those. For example, being able to flirt with Hai multiple times. And the biggest glitch was that I couldn't play the thief quest if I already acquired the first set of Supreme tools. And then there's all the typos in this game. Okay, just so you all are aware, as long as your game is understandable, I will never dock your game for bad spelling and grammar. It's just too fun to read. One of my favorite typos being, "There's room in her." That said, most people are going to be more critical about typos, so you really should avoid them. And finally, my last complaint. I really wish there was some way to rest until nighttime. When you sleep in bed, it becomes morning. Why can't you nap until night? Considering certain party members aren't awake until night falls, it would have been really nice if I didn't have to wait the 10 minutes or so for night to fall, especially considering 2 of those night party members are archers. And now, my last compliment. Moyos looked really nice. And that's it. That's my review of Ursus Quest Tree of Life. Now comes the big question, the all-important question that determines just how worthwhile it was to play this game. And that question is, would I be willing to play this game again? That's actually a really hard question to answer. Don't get me wrong, despite all the problems this game has, it's still a good game. The issue is that this is a console RPG Maker game. And while commercial games such as Darkwing Duck, for example, are easily accessible, that's not really the case with console RPG Maker games. You have to take the time to clear out some space on your memory card and use a transfer device to put the game onto the card. And unfortunately for me, the transfer device I use for RPG Maker 3 games has a 15-minute wait time. So the question isn't so much would I be willing to play this game again, so much as it is would I be willing to put up with the transfer device to play this game again. And while Tree of Life definitely has some replay value, I'm not really sure it has enough. Yes, there is the challenge of getting a perfect final rank, but aside from using better quest tools, the quests themselves won't really be much different, if at all. Yes, I could potentially play as a different character, but while that would be interesting at first, it wouldn't really change that much. The only difference that I'm aware of is that Tonk isn't willing to team up with Victor. If I had to make a suggestion, it would have been nice if, say, playing as Zoe locked her out of one quest, while playing as Victor would have locked him out of a different quest. That would have given me enough incentive to play again as the other character. But as it stands, for me, there isn't quite enough replay value. Don't get me wrong, this game was definitely worth playing once, but once is enough for me. Now, would I be willing to play this game again if I didn't have to worry about the hassle of transferring it onto a memory card? Maybe.